Okay, I think it's not going to say recording in progress because somebody else is already recording, but we are now live. So I want to welcome everybody to another VSG Oceanside chat. I see a lot of you guys so frequently joining us every week that we do these. And I just have to say how happy I am that we have this family that comes together to learn about startup culture, trends, to kind of hear from specialists. And as we continue forward, we keep meeting new people. Rob is one of these new people. He's a first-time Oceanside chat participant. I hope we get him back again and again. He's a self-diagnosed, obsessed with product market fit human person. He describes himself as ex-Harvard Business School, ex-McKinsey, turned co-founder of a venture-backed B2B SaaS company, which he was able to scale from 0 to 4 million ARR in 2 years, which I can tell you is pretty significant. I work with startups all the time. That's really, really impressive. Truthfully, product market fit is one of the biggest challenges, especially for technical founders. I think we all think that whatever we've built is so impressive and important. It's our baby. But really trying to find where it belongs in the market, I think is a huge challenge. And so I can't be more thrilled to introduce Rob and to have him tell us a little bit about how we can do that better. So Rob, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. Hello, everyone. We've got a cool group here. As Arcelia mentioned, I would love to know a little bit more. Oh gosh, Kat is here. I'd love to know a little bit more about the team. So if you don't mind putting a little introduction to who you are so I can get a sense in the meeting chat, like that'd be really helpful because I can obviously talk in whatever direction I'm going to head in. Really helps to have a little bit of context on your companies, your teams, and ideally what you're hoping to get out of this. So really excited to be here. And so, yeah, I see we still have people joining. This topic is the art and science of product market fit. Product market fit is a very weird thing. If you've been building a product, if you've been trying to go out and grow it, it's way harder and way more complicated than anybody thinks going into this. And so I'm going to give you a little bit more about like, who the heck am I and what do I know in a second. But I want to focus on this point here, which is this is a practical guide to the only thing that matters. Product market fit, according to Marc Andreessen, who I think we all know, product market fit is the only thing that matters. It's like, if you don't have product market fit, you don't have a business. There's a million different things a business can do. There's a million different, you can build the fanciest product ever. But if people don't buy it, if people don't use it, if it doesn't have that product market fit, like nothing else matters. So that's why product market fit really matters. Now, the hard part about this is that nobody, for some reason on the planet, from what I can tell, seems to know how to find product market fit or even how to think about it. And that is a very weird thing for something that is so important. And so my story, like I don't want to be here. I don't want to be talking about product market fit. I just wanted to go and build a business, right? I just wanted to build my own business. And I didn't realize that product market fit was going to be like what I got obsessed with. But my journey here has been kind of weird. And so I graduated college, went to McKinsey. I always knew I wanted to build a company someday. And so I went to McKinsey, then I went to Harvard Business School. At the time I'd read all these different startup books and I was like, okay, I'm gonna graduate and I'm gonna raise some money and I'm gonna go build a business. I'm gonna find product market fit. I'm gonna scale this thing so it's massive. So I did what everyone does, which is like I read every startup book on earth and I listened to all the podcasts and I like read all the blogs and did all of that stuff. And what they told me to do was to go and do some customer discovery, do a bunch of customer interviews, wireframe a product, and try to get customers to sign up for a pilot agreement to that product. We started coding, and then I went and I raised some money. I raised a couple $1,000,000 right out of business school. We had a couple pilot agreements signed. We had started coding, raised a pre-seed round, and then we launched our buggy V1 of the product, and we got this response. it didn't clearly have product market fit. People weren't pulling it out of our hands. It didn't have the magic. And we tried a bunch of different things, and it turned out it was really, really, really hard to sell. And so like we started building different products. We did a bunch of iterations of this, following all the best practices. And like kind of we kept raising seed extension rounds to keep trying this. What I observed in this process was, one, it was awful. This is not fun. This is probably the worst 2 years of my life, like professionally and personally. It is terrible to be in pre-product market fit. I call it pre-product market fit purgatory. It's really not fun. What I did observe is that basically only one thing was really helpful in finding product market fit. I'll come back to this in a second. But basically, this is 2 years of my life. And then we did some random stuff that shouldn't have worked with what I called a Hail Mary pivot, like last minute COVID pivot. Who knows? Just throw it downfield. And then we went 0 to 4 million ARR in 2 years. This experience broke my brain. And so I want to come back from like, I don't know, 4 years after this and like talk you through the things that, if I had known in advance, would have saved me 2 years of putting my soul through a blender. Sound good? And what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to start explaining some of these concepts. I kind of am totally cool with people like raising your hands if you don't understand something in the middle of this. So from here on out, just like feel free to do that. There will also be time at the end. I have like maybe 15 slides here. I have hundreds that I am like eager to pull in if need be, but I wanted to keep the core of this short. Okay, so what the heck happened here? So what I learned is how to waste your life, how to spend the next 2 to 5 years of your life hitting your head against a wall, which is by focusing on everything except what actually matters and getting that to Six Sigma level quality, right? Getting that to perfect. The second 2 years, I did only the things that actually mattered and literally nothing else. And when I say literally nothing else, we didn't have a website until 1 million ARR. We didn't have a way for customers to log into our product until 1 million ARR. Our demo, we didn't have an actual product demo until after 4 million ARR. It was just slides like this one, except these slides are prettier than the ones that we had. And our product was not pretty. And it was not super magical. And so like, this is weird. This is very strange. And this broke my brain on how to think about it. What I've realized in going through this process is that basically, minimum viable product market fit, there are only 3 things that actually you need. First is you need one kind of customer. Second is you need one thing that you can sell them. Third thing is you need one way to connect first thing to the second thing, right? You just need one way to make this happen. So in our case, what that wound up being, we sold a software to restaurants that helped them recruit and retain their employees. That was it. It was really, really simple. And we just did that 10,000 times and just repeated that 10,000 times. What I found is if you just focus on these things, and I'll tell you how and like my general framework for this after, you just focus on these things, then like you can ignore all the other stuff that sounds interesting and exciting. This is the core of the business. You don't have to worry about how to get PR. You don't have to worry about how to raise a ton of money from investors, but you just build a solid business with this kind of approach to product market fit, these are the only things that actually matter. And if you can just repeat this, then like that simplifies everything about the business. So I break this down into a framework. It's a three-part framework, right? There is demand, supply, and distribution. Demand is, and I'm going to go into each one of these in a little more detail in a little bit, but demand is nothing that you control. Demand has nothing to do with your product. It is a kind of person who needs to accomplish a kind of project or a kind of goal. So you have a certain kind of person who needs to accomplish something. On the supply side, this is what you're selling, right? You're selling some sort of a product, some sort of a service that delivers some sort of unique value to this kind of person. And then on the distribution side, it's just you have a way to turn people who don't know you into potential customers, and then into actual customers, and then people who love you. Like, that is the framework. And so before I go further, I've got a quiz question in a second. I just want to like pulse check. Are people tracking with me? Am I making any sense at this point? Does this resonate at all?
Yeah, it triggers for me a lot of questions, but 100% this is, exactly what teams think about and talk about here especially at the earliest stage.
Cool. Okay. What I found is that the challenging part of this is that there are basically infinite things you can do and infinite things you can focus on. And your brain is super scattered. Like, okay, should we do a blog? Should we be an influencer? Should we do influencer marketing? Should we do like all of these different things are out there. And so my hope is that this kind of framework and what's going to come pretty shortly on how to think about these will help you clarify what actually matters, because it's like much less than you think.
There's two questions in the chat.
Yeah, let's jump into those.
So the first one is, just out of curiosity, is Hail Mary pivot different from a regular pivot? This was like something you mentioned on a previous slide.
Yeah, it's just a code word for a pivot that we had no reason to think would actually work, and basically just a prayer. And so it's not a technical term. It's just like a football. Yeah, you just kind of like throw the ball up.
Second question is, the framework, does this apply to services or only products?
This applies to both. And it also, what I've found is that this framework also applies to consumer businesses, basically anything where you need somebody else to buy or use something that you're trying to sell. Awesome. Anything else in the chat, Marcelia? Are we good?
Nothing else in the chat. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask aloud before we move forward? Go for it.
Rock on. Okay, cool. So we're going to do a quiz. One of these three things is 100x more important than the other two. Demand, supply, distribution. One of them is the most important by a factor of everything. What do people think it is?
Is it demand?
I'm seeing question marks. Yes, demand. And the interesting thing is that we actually don't have, in my experience, we haven't had a way to think about like what is demand. My whole, like the Hail Mary pivot that I went through started when I heard a podcast where somebody was like, no, you don't understand. There's supply and there's demand. And the best framing for demand, and I'm going to go into it in more detail in a second, is that supply is all the things you control. Demand, you do not control at all. Demand is totally outside of your control. You can't make people want what you have, what you've built. People have to accomplish things in their world. Like, you can't change that. They're not going to wake up and be like, you know what? I was going to focus on this, but today I want this app or I want this service. Like, no, it doesn't work like that. People have projects they need to accomplish, goals they need to accomplish, and so demand is the most important but least understood concept in business, in my experience, by far. I didn't understand it basically, and I still feel like I'm kind of understanding it. It's really, really complicated. So a couple pieces on like what demand is. First, demand is people who need to change in order to accomplish something or solve something. There's a set of things that happen. If you think about like, when was the last time you bought something like that was different? Like, it's something happened in your world that caused you to like need to actually buy something. What I found too is that like demand, there's like different intensities of demand. The more desperate people are to change, the better, right? So that's the stronger the demand. I also think like demand takes a certain shape. So like I think of demand actually as kind of like a project that a customer has. I have a project, for example, so like, I don't know, I need to implement some new kind of a process to generate sales for my business. Or I have a project to stop losing customers because of X, Y, and Z reasons, right? These are projects. And a pocket of demand, I think of that demand's in pockets. So demand is repeated. And so if you think of demand as like a project that a certain kind of person who needs to change has, you just want to find that repeated demand, that repeated project on the demand side. And you want to find people who just like need to accomplish that things. And so it's often narrower than you think, right? Insure tech companies with an outsourced development who have raised less than $2 million, who just hired their first engineering leader, and their leader has to fix a lot of bugs. This is one of the companies that I work with. Like, this is their actual target customer. This is what their target customer is desperately trying to accomplish. And so, like, this is the way to think about demand. How you find demand, this is like quite hard, but the goal is to find one person who says like, yes, I desperately need to accomplish this project. And then you can find others. You just try to repeat it from there. So there are 3 ways to go and find demands. Like, one that I found, this is especially useful if you don't have a product idea yet, or if you don't have any customers yet. It's like, go get first-hand experience doing the job that the customer has. Go literally sit with them and do it with them. Second is like, narrow your focus. I tend to see that people want to serve everybody. In theory, I want to serve all restaurants. Well, in my business, we first focused on McDonald's franchisees with less than 5 stores. We started there, and then we expanded in time once we nailed that. And so you narrow your focus to one kind of customer. Or the alternative is you say, no, I'm going to release something into the public, and I'm going to see who really, really loves it, and I'm just going to focus on that kind of person. The goal is to get to a very specific kind of person who needs to change in a repeatable way, has a similar project that you can then like deliver to a bunch of other people. And then like over time, what I've found, every 6 to 12 months, every couple of weeks at first, and then every 6 to 12 months, you're just going to ask, what are they really buying? What are they really not buying? Like, you just keep asking that forever. And the last thing is, demand isn't anything to do with your product. Your product is a response to demand. Demand is upstream of supply. So that's kind of how I think about demand. Demand is a really confusing concept. So I want to pause and see if there are questions on demand.
There is one question. It's about value canvas and business model canvas. Rafi wanted to know how is this different from those 2 setups?
Yeah. So I can go pretty detailed on this. I actually find value prop and business model canvas to be totally counterproductive, because they're kind of like lists of things. It's kind of like a checklist for different things that like may or may not be important. And so like one of the things on like the business model canvas is like partners, and so like there's a list of things on there that don't matter. and it doesn't treat this whole thing as a coherent system. And so at the beginning, I used the value prop canvas and the business model canvas, and what it came up with was stuff that actually was not stuff that customers would buy. And so the reason why I came to this like core 3-piece model is because those things didn't work for me, or basically any of the other founders that I worked with on the other side of it. So I tend to try to like, what I found is that the 3-part model, demand, supply, distribution, is the like narrowest articulation of the system of product market fit, of what actually customers want to accomplish, how exactly we serve them, and how we make that system work. Like that is the minimum viable piece. Those are the minimum viable pieces of product market fit. And then when you add anything else to that, it actually makes it counterproductive, in my experience.
There's a comment about demand where Rafi mentions that he looks at demand as a problem that a customer wants to solve. Is he?
A lot of people think of demand as problems and pain points and things like that. I like to think of it as projects. The reason I like to think of it as projects is because projects are like actual units of work. And so like, I don't go about my day thinking about my problems. I think of like, I have actual projects to accomplish. And so when I think about this in terms of a project that a customer has, yes, that can incorporate problems and it can be relevant because of pain points, but a project is the unit of action. And so that's kind of how that's how I differentiate this.
There's a question about how to narrow your focus. It's asking when you launch into kind of like a customer base and you're trying to determine which type of person you'll focus on, what are you looking for? What are the things you're looking for?
Yeah, so I think what a lot of people do is they try to like release something into the world and just see who bites. And so one of two things happens then. One is nobody bites. That's a certain kind of problem. Second thing is some people really like it, some people really don't. When you launch it into the world, the most important thing is to look at who says heck yes. Who says heck yes? Sorry, I changed the terminology in here. We're a student organization. And so what you want to do is you want to find the people who are saying heck yes and find more people like them. That's your replicable, that's what replicates. You don't want to necessarily go and find people who don't like you and try to convince them to like you, because you already have people who like you. Why not play the game that's like easier to play? And so that's how I tend to think about it. If you don't have anybody who like takes it up and uses it, that's a separate kind of problem. I'm happy to talk about that.
Yeah, I just want to mention to everyone in the group, like if you guys, everyone's dropping them in the chat. So for instance, Terry, you have a question. I'd like to welcome you to ask it yourself if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, thanks, Arcelia. Rob, thanks for the chat. Everything's super interesting. I guess I was just wondering, is finding demand different from market research, or like I'm assuming it's part of it? And then I do have a second question that's different from that, and it's just how do you choose what the best approach is for finding demand?
Yeah, Terry, you are like one slide ahead of where we are. That's the exact next thing. How do we find demand? So that is such a good question.
Thanks.
Okay, so that will be answered shortly. And then Gatos has a question. Would you like to ask it out loud? I'll give you 2 seconds. He's on his iPhone, or he or she is on her.
I think that's Kat. I think. I'm not sure.
Is it? Okay, so the question is, how does product differentiation come in? aka how are you different from your competitors? Usually people find something
Yes.
help them solve their problem.
How are you different from competitors, and where does that come in? What I'll go through in a second is basically the way to figure this out is to learn by selling. Like that's the way to find product market fit. So Terry, that's the kind of answer to your question. It's kind of customer research and it's kind of not. And the best part is they pay you for it, which is great. usually when people have a project, they consider different options for accomplishing that project. Like there are probably 10 ways I could go about hitting my sales numbers for next year, for example. There's like a billion different things that I could possibly do, 10 that I'm going to consider, and a couple sub bullets there. And so that's how differentiation is relevant. Like you fit into one of the options, and then there's just got to be a reason why I choose you versus alternatives. And so we can get into that a little bit more. There's some appendix slides I can always pull up to jump into differentiation there. But yeah, it's basically like product differentiation is like one term of differentiation. It's the most expensive version of differentiation, but like, why would I choose you versus an alternative is a question that your customers will ask.
There's just a comment about how business model canvas is best to work without them. Honestly, from an earlier slide when you were talking about noise, I feel like that's a perfect example of like visual noise. It's easy to get distracted, especially if you're struggling. For teams, I know this is the case when there are difficult questions to answer, it sometimes becomes more palatable to handle the things that are the peripheral things, because you can execute on them so quickly, and you can spend a lot of time dressing it up, or like getting lost in product land is one of the things I like to talk about. And it's because it's very difficult to address this kind of issue, which is to really find your target customer.
Yes. Can I just like the
Yeah.
reason why I have to touch up my Zoom screen, the reason why I look like I'm 50 when I'm 32 years old is because I focused on all of the things other than what actually mattered. And because like I didn't force myself to focus on the only things that actually mattered. So don't do that. Like there are only very few things actually matter, and everything in you is going to not want to focus on them because they're hard and they're uncomfortable to do. But like, do them, focus on them. Otherwise, you'll pay the price in the future.
And then we'll take Yasmin's question, and then we'll definitely move on. There's a question in the chat, but we'll cover it during our next break. Yasmin, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I just wanted to, because my question was asked earlier, and I just wanted to kind of follow up on that. So I just wanted a little bit more clarification around like the heck yeah person and like those, like what are they doing? Obviously they're purchasing from you, but are you looking at like key, like not only are they purchasing from you, but like what is the consistencies amongst the people who are purchasing, like a specific demographic? Like, is that what you're saying when you're saying this is the one person because they are actually going through and buying from you?
That's a really good question. And that's like one of the most important questions to ask too, is like, how do I, there's two sides to it. One is like, how do I find a heck yes customer? How do I find that customer? Sorry, like I'm very habituated to saying it a certain way.
You can say hell, Rob. Hell. We're all adults. I'll start it.
Okay,
Don't feel
cool.
like you can't.
Okay. So how do you find your hell yes customer and know when you have one? And then like when you have a hell yes customer, how do you know what about them makes them a hell yes customer so you can replicate it? Those are the two sides of the question, right? And the on the like, how do you know that they're a hell yes customer? You can feel it. You can feel, and you want to feel it at every point in the process, right? You want to feel it when they first talk to you and they're like, oh my gosh, this sounds really interesting. Then you want to feel it when they buy and they're like, oh my God, I'm so excited to buy this, to use this, right? And most importantly, you want them to feel it after they buy and like once they have used it. And I'll pull up a diagram of this. But you want it at each stage of that. But that's not good enough because as you've identified, something about them and something about what they're trying to accomplish, something about their project, what demand is in their mind is causing them to say, hell yes, at every stage. It might be demographics. It might be company size. It might be some random thing that happened in their world last week. Like
Mhm.
I would encourage you to think of this as like a causal journey. They have a project that emerges. How do they describe that project? How do they think about it? And how do you solve that project? And then, like, based on what is actually relevant there, how do you repeat that? How do you find people
Yeah.
who are identical to that person and just find repeated hell yes customers there?
And
That's how I think.
these are people you're talking to regularly. Like you're reaching out to them to like get like feedback and have conversations. Okay.
Most founders like don't want to do this.
Mhm.
And I don't understand.
Hmm.
Oh, no, I do understand it because I just want to put products out there and have everyone buy it and like just like lay on the beach and everyone to tell me how nice I am. But like the way to actually figure this out is you have to talk to customers all the time. I
Mhm.
onboarded our first 350 customers one-on-one, back-to-back. And it took years off of my life, but it was so valuable because they told me things that helped me build the right product.
Thank you for that. That was really helpful.
Awesome. Okay, we're gonna plug forward. Arcelia, I'll let you jump in and interrupt me, or anybody raise your hand. And okay, so big question is, okay, if we know product market fit is just three things, it can't be any more than those three things. It is just three things. And we know what's most important there. The question that you have already asked. Okay, cool. How do I find it? Okay, so as somebody who has tried literally everything else, this is what I have figured out to actually kind of work. So first is do whatever it takes. Brute force, like whatever you need to do within the law, but whatever else it takes, fly out to people, like go deliver things in person, whatever it takes. Find your one heck yes customer. Second is sell using that customer's case study to try to replicate that case study. This is actually this is actually a superpower. I can go into this more if people are interested, but like most people are, I'll say loosely scared of sales. I hated it. I still kind of hate it. Selling using a case study actually makes everything way easier. And like, then you focus on the case study. What's wrong with the case study that's causing people to not buy? What's not replicating in the case study that is not resonating with them? Versus like me thinking that when people don't buy, it's because they don't love me and I don't have a product that's good. And like, having the case study be the focus of the sales process, and whether it's B2B or B2C, right? Like the description of the person, what they're trying to accomplish, etc. Like you sell using a case study. Cool. So you do that. In 1 and 2, you're going to have customers hate you. You're going to have customers turn. Just embrace that. That's going to happen. It's going to be painful. It's going to be awful. But this is the way that you learn. And in time, you debug things because everything's going to break. And so you try to figure out as you're trying to sell using the customer's case study, it won't work. Customers won't be happy. You'll realize, oh, actually, it wasn't this demographic thing that connected these customers. It was actually this situational thing or whatever it is, right? And yeah, over time, you make it easier to buy and refine your 3 insights about demand, supply, distribution to really figure out who the heck is buying, what the heck are they buying, what am I doing on this planet, well, all that stuff. And then finally, when you're consistently able to do this, when you're able to replicate this time and time again, and it kind of works, and it's no longer a surprise, and it's no longer super painful, then you can figure out how to pour on the gas to growth. And usually what you learn from 1 to 3 will tell you how to do that. And so that is so I have a framework we've walked through for product market fit. Only 3 things are important. The way to figure out those 3 things is basically these 4 steps. There's maybe a little bit more nuance, but this is the core of it. probably have some more slides, but I want to pause here because this, yeah, I have a couple more slides on specifically how to think about each step in this kind of like sell to learn process. But is this making any sense?
Yeah, so the challenges I hear often from teams is, for instance, let's say they have been able to do steps 1 through 3. And you're suggesting that those things should inform how you do 4. But, so for instance, like scaling a very like high touch customer acquisition process can be really challenging, right? Meaning like having all the time as a founder to focus and continue to do this, and do it at scale, is like sometimes impossible, especially if you aren't bringing in any capital from investors, or you don't have money to basically help hire to make that a more reasonable process. Like what do you tell founders in those types of situations where they're like, oh my God, we did it, we found these customers, but like the process is very high touch, and I'm spending all my time doing it, but but they do need that hockey stick in order to get the money, in order to hire the right type of,
Totally. So it's a good question. And like honestly, that's a good problem to have if you're there. Usually what I see is like it's just very hard to get there. And so for me, we did everything manually. When things actually worked, like I was the product, and then I manually onboarded every single customer. And then we hired. So this was a very small team that actually made this work. There were like, I don't know, 4 people who were actually like really, really in it. And so, yeah, we can talk. Actually, I have a little bit more on like how to grow in a second. The general approach is like, first, there are kind of like 3 stages to scaling anything. The first is the magic stage, which is like, how do you figure out what actually works? And it has a bit of magic and a lot of elbow grease. The second stage is, how do you systematize something that works? So like that's where you go from, okay, we're doing a bunch of work and it's totally chaotic, to no, we have a process and we're cutting out waste from that process, and now it's just like a standard operating procedure. And then only then can you scale the
I
thing.
see. So it's almost like going back to step 3 and figuring, or steps 1 through 3, and figuring out what maybe the issues are in that process. Maybe you're closing, you're getting people to participate with you, but that whole system is not really lean and set up well.
Correct.
I
Correct.
see.
And it's usually that it works, but it's too much work. And so if it works and it's too much work, then you just look at it and say, okay, how do we systematize this so that we still get the same results? Can we automate a piece of this? Can we do whatever it is? Yeah.
Is there a threshold for a heck yes customer in terms of time spent capturing them, right? Like getting them interested and having them, from that meeting to getting them on board?
No, I don't think of it that way, because in time all of this will change. What you try to do is you try to like reverse engineer, like we were talking about earlier with, I think, Yasmin, was it? Where it's, you try to reverse engineer who they were and like why they said hell yes. And then it's like, okay, how do we redesign the whole system to get them to hell yes faster? How do we cut out, because we did a bunch of random things that actually didn't matter. We had a whole part of our product that was about customizing recruitment messages. And that took so much time and nobody cared. And so the reason I know that nobody cared is because somebody told me, I don't care. And then I said, okay, what if I just preload it with best practice? They said, perfect, don't bother me with this. And then the next customer, I said, what if I just preload this with best practices, best practice messaging? And they're like, perfect, I don't want to think about that. And then so we just cut out a week of the process of our onboarding, just like with learning things like that. And so that's kind of how it works. You just kind of figure out what the real hell yes is, and eventually you build train tracks to get straight there.
Right. Okay, so we have some questions in the chat. Kelvin, are you available to ask your question out loud?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sweet. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, my question really quick was just, I've been in a lot of accelerators workshops, and something I always hear is people talk about pain points, which is like a problem that needs to be solved, versus gain points, which is like improving something that maybe isn't necessarily a problem yet, but there's a lot of space for improvement. And so I just wanted to hear your thoughts. What about companies who have value propositions that improve something rather than fixes something?
Yeah, that's kind of like vitamins versus painkillers. And I find that is it's one of those other things. There's so many things in this world that sound right and make no sense in practice. And I think this is one of those. And the reason is like, I think of this in terms of projects. What is a project that your customer has to accomplish that's on their critical path? It might be related to pain points. It might not. Pain points might cause a project to get on the critical path, right? Like if your product goes down, then you have a pretty important critical path project that you need to solve. But it also might be something that's different. And so I think of that on like totally different vectors. Vitamin versus painkiller, same thing, right? Like there is, first of all, I think the vitamin market is bigger than the painkiller market. Second of all of the like vitamins are all purchased significantly, and they're, yeah, like there's a very clear project for example, a prenatal vitamin. Like there's a very clear and important project for that. That's a very clear business. And so most of this like sounds right in theory, and in practice it's totally irrelevant. Focus on the customer's project. And can you articulate a project, something they would actually put in their project management tool?
Okay, thank you.
Great job. Okay, there's an iPhone question, so I don't know who I'm asking if they want to ask this out loud. It's about consumer product versus B2B. Is that person available to ask?
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, it's me. I'm in the car right now, so sorry for not tuning in with my camera. But question is basically, what's the difference in this mindset of finding demand, finding these heck yes people, when you're looking at a B2B business versus a consumer product like an app or a physical product or something like that? How do things change in that regard?
Yeah, I've used this with both B2B and B2C before, this kind of framing. Like there are some nuances in how you acquire customers, like the channels that tend to work and things like that, but it is really the same principles work. Like yeah, like this process was used to like determine ZQuil, for example. Like this was behind the how to figure out ZQuil and DayQuil versus just NyQuil, right? And so like it works in consumer scenarios as well.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, I was just curious because with, let's say an app, for example, like one I'm trying to develop, it doesn't really make sense to go out and find individual customers. But I guess you could kind of categorize them in specific ways and then kind of approach it that way.
I would think so. I would push you on that to say maybe it does make sense to go find individual customers and like really observe them, or users, and really observe them. And then you can, because like everyone's going to download it one at a time anyway. And so you have to understand that atomic unit. People don't download apps in groups. They download apps one by one. And so to the extent that you can understand that from like a firsthand perspective of exactly what causes them to do that, like that will give you so much more learning than looking at a bunch of like data rows on a data table and saying, well, why did these people do this and why did these people not? Like I actually think the firsthand experience is just as relevant in that case too, in the one-on-one.
Right. And then I guess what could be different between this approach and maybe a B2B is, you said earlier, maybe not to focus on the people who don't want your product because, they're already set and you already have a system that's working. But with something like an app, it would be necessary to kind of sell people on it and get extra users to download it. Whereas if you're doing a B2B, you know, if a business doesn't want your service, then you can kind of leave it for now.
I could challenge you there too, though. There are plenty of reasons to only focus on the people who, and it'll depend on the app, but like there are plenty of reasons to only focus on the kind of person who says hell yes, because it's way easier to grow in that, and then other people will eventually come on for other reasons. I think on a lot of consumer apps, that's actually how they find, it's called like the white hot center, and you just you do everything you can to figure out what that is.
Got it. Makes sense. I appreciate your input. Thank you very much.
Yeah, totally. Good questions.
We have Jess in the chat with a question. Jess, are you there?
Yes. Hi, Rob. My question was around what content you'd recommend approaching customers with, because I've just been struggling with approaching customers and them asking for a demo. And then we're going back to the drawing board and creating a whole demo, like a full-fledged demo around what our product will look like in probably like a few months. So
Yeah. Great question. Great question. This is, yeah. What I tend to do here is instead of doing an actual product demo, like you might remember from my story, we didn't actually do a product demo until 4 million ARR, and I don't think we even did after that. And so what you do, what I tend to do when somebody asks for a demo is you want to be having as many demos as possible because you want to be testing this. But what you're testing in the demo is not like, let me show you the product and how it works. It's let me show you the case study of how someone just like you approached this project. And so what I do is I create a case study deck that is like a demo deck, and you put the case study into slides. I have a whole slide deck on like how to do this. Let me throw this in the chat. No, I did this.
It's genius. A case study deck. I've never even heard of such a thing. Is this commonplace?
No, this is
gosh,
insane.
I
This
can't wait
took
to
me
mention
so
this.
much pain to figure this out, but it's like super helpful so I just put it in the chat. I did that presentation for On Deck. There's probably more stuff out on it. But no, it's just that like you sell using a case study. That's the thing, is like they're buying the case study, they're not buying the product. They're buying that. And so you put a case study deck in front of them, and the slide deck explains how to do that. And like then you iterate on the case deck, and that way you don't have to make a bunch of product iterations. And you don't have to like try to play whack-a-mole with like what features do you want, and you don't have to spearfish for people's pain points and that. So that whole slide deck should save you the next 12 months of pain. So enjoy that.
great. Thank you.
Then we have Terry with a question.
Yeah, hi.
Terry.
Hello. I worked at a startup before, and so I did user research for them to try to like I was the main designer for them, so I was just constantly talking to the customers and like the executive account person to see like what the feedback was. But a lot of the times I found that like in that place specifically, the founder, he would make changes based on like what one person would suggest or like one investor would say. And
Yeah.
I found that very like not the best approach. And also I have always been taught to do like at least 5, like almost like a full round, like talk to at least 5 users before making like a full change. Same, it's like a standard by Nielsen Norman. But then also, I don't know if that is a best practice. So in your experience, have you found it to be more successful to kind of just go like as people say it, or do you kind of do like a full like round of like, let's talk to like this amount of people and then make a change? And this is like towards when you were saying you're trying to optimize your system to like for the customer acquisition, but I guess I'm also asking it in regards to like making just general changes as well.
Yeah, so if you're on like step 3 here and things are like repeatedly working and you're hearing stuff from customers and you have the accumulated knowledge of steps 1 through 3 of like having hit your head against the wall, then at that stage you generally know enough to know what changes to make without having to do a ton of research. you have to have a coherent theory of demand, supply, distribution that it like makes sense in practice, that you have proved in practice. And at that stage, you don't need as much customer research. Early on, you kind of just want to learn by selling. I tend to find like a lot of customer research in startups is kind of like them lying to themselves, then to you, and then you lying to yourself. And so that's why I like to like sell to learn. But like the longer you go on and the more accumulated knowledge and the more coherent your theory on this is, like the less actual research you need. Yeah, you want to put stuff in front of customers and like test stuff and change stuff, and you never want to make changes based on what investors say. Nope. But like, yeah, so that's kind of how I think about that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to jump into the go-to-market system real quick, and then we can keep going from here. But like the learning by selling, there's basically 3 pieces to this. There's like, how do you generate sales meetings? Then how do you generate customers? And then like, how do you turn customers into like hell yes customers who refer others? There's 3 pieces to this system, and your job as a founder is just to like do these 3 things and make them work, and like use that case study demo template that I already sent across, right, to like test this repeatedly and try to sell. And then once you sell using the case study, you try to deliver on the case study, and you learn things, and things break, and you just focus on this system, and that's it. And like, you zoom out from this system, if you think of this as almost like an assembly line for generating repeated case studies, you just first you find a way to start having conversations with people. You just find a way to do that repeatedly. And then once you start having conversations with people repeatedly, you kind of focus on the sales process of like, okay, I'm having a lot of conversations, nobody's buying, let's focus there. Then once you have conversations and people are buying, your success process is going to break and people are going to be mad at you. And so you just fix that then, and you figure that out then. And then once you have all of that that's kind of working, then you just focus on the systems bottleneck. And so if you have like 1 in 20 customers who are like who are like turning into customers, it's like, okay, let's focus on that and let's solve that. And so, and then yeah, and then you focus on pipeline from there. So that's how I think about this whole system. These are the end of my slides, I promise. I can always pull up more as you can tell. Questions, thoughts, comments?
Well, we finally got are we going to get these slides after the presentation, which I think is like the sign of general approval that this was a very useful Oceanside chat. So you should feel very proud of yourself.
Hey, I made it.
And hopefully you will be comfortable and confident sharing that, because I like to pass it along to everybody who's been able to join us, and also those who weren't able to join us because, you know, people get busy. This was great, and I know you have so much more to talk about on this topic, Rob, so I'm hoping that maybe we can snag you for a part 2 product market fit sometime later this year. Does anyone have any burning questions from the for the presentation for Rob while we still have him?
I just put the slides in the chat.
So, I mean, I have a few just general questions. Oh, here we go. Let's see. No, never mind. Just a bunch of thank yous. So, you know, when teams in the garage are up against this kind of product market fit monster, I find that they, you know, sometimes they have like several avenues to attack. One is like the smaller scale, especially for B2B, the smaller scale businesses. And then they have these big white whale style enterprise customers that, you know, in terms of sales cycle and the way that those things happen are just completely different. And they kind of take almost your full attention to tackle either one. Do you have, in terms of like that hell yeah customer, any suggestions on how to make that decision?
Yeah, generally, if you don't have a specific reason why you can win in the enterprise, don't go into the big customers. Like, you're going to fail on your first couple of customers, and you don't want to do that on Walmart. And like, you don't want to, you want to learn faster. And so I tend to say like smaller to mid-sized customers is generally, even if you want to eventually go into enterprise, start there, figure out what the real thing is there. Now, unless you have some specific reason or some specific connections or something that like give you an advantage and a reason to believe you can win in the enterprise, awesome. But that's hard. And like it takes a long time to learn. So
Got it. Roger that. Yasmin, question?
Yes. I wanted to know in the GTM system, specifically with pipeline, what have you found in terms of ways to that primary engines that typically or consistently work to kind of move people through your pipeline of like getting those sales and then turning them into like raving customers? Also, thank you for sharing all your knowledge. This was really helpful.
oh, cool.
Appreciate it.
Cool. I'm glad. I usually like at minute 20 of these, I'm like, I don't know if I'm saying anything that makes any sense. So I'm glad something here is useful. Yeah, like that's a $1 billion question. I don't know. Like, how do you generate pipeline? Like, kind of nothing really works, and then something really does. And so there's nothing really general. It's always something that's like weird and specific to your scenario. So like I have a company that realized that when new CTOs get hired, like that's a really strong buying signal for them. And so like they're just focusing on how do we just talk to every new CTO, and they're just doing weird stuff around that. So it's often like something weird that only your business can do, that only makes sense for you. I know that's not like super helpful. There's a lot of like foundational things that you do around like ads and outbound and stuff like that. But like the real answer is in the early stage, you just do whatever it takes and use founder magic. And then in time, you learn enough to figure out what one channel to really invest in.
Thank you.
Terry's got a question.
Hi again. Sorry, I'm just filled with questions today. This is super insightful and very helpful. I earlier in the slide deck, you'd mentioned something about like what if no product market fit is found. I think we didn't super go into it, but I am really curious about like what how to approach that, like what the best strategies would be if that happens.
Yeah, so basically two angles here. One is who do I want to serve? And then you just go ask them what they would pay you to help them with, right? Like that's how I think about it. And the second is like actually that's probably the best way to think about it. Who do I want to serve? This all of this gets simpler when you realize that like building a startup, building a product, like doing all of this stuff is all just a way to serve other people. And it puts the emphasis on how do you serve, and the other people rather than all the things that you do. And so who do I want to serve, and what do they want to accomplish? What are their projects? Like you can go figure that out. If things are like kind of working, then you debug it, right? If you can get meetings, but they're like, yeah, this isn't my project, then you figure out what the project is and you go from there. Like it's, yeah, that's kind of like the 40-second answer.
And that also makes a lot of sense in terms of kind of easing that sales process for non-sales people. I think when you consider if you consider yourself a service provider and you truly understand who you're serving, it makes talking to them pretty easy actually, because you've really like crystallized like what the whole exchange is meant to be. And I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges, at least for non-sales people that I hear, is like that salesy approach, right? And convincing people. And it's just so uncomfortable and embarrassing and painful. And people don't like to do that. But when you think of it as more of a service provision, I think it's more palatable. I have one more question about the identifying, that hell yes customer, because I do feel like that's at the root of this kind of process, right? Once you can determine that, then you start building off of that case study, and you can, those three subsections start to build on this framework. Is there like categorically or some sort of classification system that you can look at, like a customer to help you better identify what makes them unique, so that you can then go and strategically find more of them. You know how you'd like, you'd loosely mentioned like it could be this, it could be that, but are there just like verticals of like people, you know, or whatever, or businesses that you can kind of look into so that you can find those patterns and recognize who that person is? Do you look at it that scientifically? I feel like data makes my life easier. So being able to break a person down into classifications or categories would make that easier.
Yeah, I wish that was the case. Like I wish that were, it's often like, it's often not that simple, and thinking in those terms is often counterproductive.
I
Like
see. I can imagine.
the reason why people buy things is not because they're a 32-year-old male who lives in New Hampshire, right? The reason I buy a certain thing, it's totally different than that. It has almost, I mean, some things maybe, but like most things are not like that, and they're not plotted on some sort of like rational diagram of all the potential. Now, you can just think of all the characteristics that could be relevant on this, and you can make a list of those. But I would encourage you to like, that's my problem with like the value prop canvas and the business model canvas, is they list all the things that could be relevant, which makes you think that all of those things are important, and they're not. And even that frame of thinking may actually not help. So that's my warning to you.
Makes a lot of sense. Anyone else have any questions? We're 2 minutes over. We want to be respectful of Robin's time and everybody else, but maybe one more question. And if there isn't, maybe Rob, you can give us one parting piece of knowledge, some advice that you can give to early stage founders. They're up against so much, you know, because you were there. Anything you
Yes,
can say?
so I'm putting my LinkedIn in the chat too. Feel free to like reach out and connect. I think that's my LinkedIn. If not, connect with whoever that is. Cool. Yeah, I mean, so the secret in all of this is actually the last thing that I mentioned, which was like this building a company, doing all of this. If you think of it as an act of service to other people, everything else gets easier. The hard part of this is we focus on ourselves in the world that we wish existed, and we come up with a bunch of frameworks and things like that that take us away from the simple act of finding a way to uniquely serve others. That's the secret. Think of it that way. Everything else tends to get a lot easier. So
Thank you so much for your time, Rob. This was wonderful. I'm just going to mention to the group, VSG is actively recruiting for our next cohort. We kick off in the spring. And so I'm just going to drop our website into the chat. You guys can check out a little bit about who we are and what we do outside of these Oceanside chats. Oceanside chats are our way to interact with the general population. It's how we build our big VSG family. But we also have teams that we serve who incubate with us, and we provide very specific resources just to them. If you guys are an early stage tech startup in Los Angeles, please feel free to apply for the spring. And I always tell people, if you apply for the spring, you don't get into the spring because we only take a few teams. Apply in the fall and then apply again in the next 6-month cycle, because teams who continue to apply and grow and show their ability to achieve the goals that they set are perfect teams for the garage. And so that link is in the chat. Rob, I'm going to get you again. We're going to get you again to come and do another chat. I know you have so much more inside of you. So thanks for your time this time, and proactively thanking you for your time next time.
awesome. All right. Thanks all. Bye.
Bye, everybody.